It was just past 1 a.m., and the only sound in the woods was the crunch of leaves under my boots and the distant hoot of an owl. I wasn't doing anything suspicious, just taking a short walk near my cabin to clear my head. The stars were out, the air was crisp, and for once, everything felt calm. That was, until flashing red and blue lights lit up the trees behind me. I turned around, confused. I hadn't called anyone. I didn't even have my phone with me. But within seconds, a police cruiser pulled up, and the officer stepped out, hand resting on his holster. He asked for my ID and wanted to know why I was out so late. Still dazed, I explained I was staying at the cabin I owned just a few yards down the trail. That's when I saw her standing by the road in her robe and slippers. Arms crossed was Karen from the HOA. She was whispering something to another officer, her face full of fake concern. I'd seen her around a few times since I bought the place, always finding something to complain about. My porch light was too bright. I parked half an inch over the line. My dog barked once too many times. You get the picture. Apparently tonight, me walking around my own property was suspicious. She'd called 911 saying a strange man was trespassing near the cabins and possibly trying to break in. I kept calm and handed over my ID. The officer studied it, his face shifting slightly when he read the name. He made a quick call on his radio. A minute passed. Then he asked Karen to step aside. That's when the tone changed completely, you see? What Karen didn't know and what I never broadcasted was that I worked with a federal agency, and not just any agency. It's the kind that doesn't appreciate false reports or public scenes. The officers didn't say much after that, but I noticed how quickly their posture shifted. One of them quietly escorted Karen back toward her home, while the other returned my ID with a respectful nod, but this was far from over. What happened next turned the whole community upside down. And Karen, she had no idea what she'd just triggered. The next morning, the entire HOA group chat was buzzing. I woke up to over 30 notifications, screenshots, questions, and not so subtle jabs. It seemed Karen had gone on a full-blown rant after the police left, accusing me of being dangerous, unstable, and, my personal favorite, military adjacent. I didn't bother replying. I just sat on my porch with my coffee, watching as neighbors walked by, pretending not to stare. What most of them didn't know was that I'd purchased the cabin not for retirement or weekend getaways, but because I needed privacy, real privacy. My job didn't exactly allow for apartment living in busy neighborhoods or nosy neighbors watching my every move. The cabin, tucked at the edge of the HOA's jurisdiction, seemed like the perfect place. Wasn't until Karen decided I was her next project. She had a way of digging into everyone's life. Complaints sent to Facebook groups, emails forwarded to the HOA board, even Pinterest posts where she not so anonymously criticized people who think they're above the rules. She was the reason one neighbor had to repaint their shed 3 times. And now, after what happened last night, she was fully convinced I was some kind of threat. I thought about leaving it alone, just let it blow over, but something wasn't sitting right. Why had she been watching my cabin at 1 a.m. in the first place? There were no security patrols in this area, and her house was at least a 5-minute walk uphill. That meant she either heard something or had been deliberately monitoring my place. Either way, it wasn't normal. Later that day, I drove into town to grab supplies at Lowe's. On the way back, I noticed a dark SUV parked just down the road from my driveway. Not one of the locals' windows tinted, engine still running. I slowed down, watching as the driver turned his head slightly away. Something was definitely off. I didn't stop. Just drove past like nothing was unusual. But the SUV was still there when I came back out 20 minutes later. By that evening, the rumors had spread like wildfire. Someone posted a blurry photo of me at the gas station with the caption, "*guy in cabin FBI or fake." AITA threads popped up on Reddit debating whether Karen had overstepped or if I was really hiding something. Even IG reels were being made, mocking the whole scene. But behind the jokes, I could feel the tension building. Karen had opened a door she couldn't close, and now someone else was watching. That night, I barely slept, kept thinking about the SUV, the police call, and the look on Karen's face when she realized she might have gone too far. But knowing her, she'd find a way to twist the story. She always did. The next morning, I walked out to find a notice taped to my door. Another HOA violation. It's this time. Suspicious nighttime activity. No joke. She'd somehow turned her mistake into an official complaint. I wasn't the only one fed up. A neighbor, Mark, who lived 2 cabins down, stopped by later that afternoon. He looked frustrated, glancing around before speaking. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "Karen's done this before. Last year she tried to get a family. Evicted because their teenage son wore a hoodie after dark, said he looked gang-affiliated. They ended up moving." I didn't know whether to be shocked or angry. This wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. Karen was weaponizing fear and using her HOA status like a badge, and now she'd dragged in law enforcement over nothing. I started wondering how far she'd go, especially now that she knew there was more to me than just a cabin and a dog. But there was more going on than just Karen. Later that week, I noticed the SUV again. Same spot, same tinted windows. Always parked at odd hours, never staying long. I mentioned it to Mark, and his face went pale. "You think that's Karen's doing?" I asked. He shook his head. "No way, that's not her style. She uses gossip and Facebook. Whoever that is, they're not local." I started to feel boxed in. Between Karen stirring the pot with HOA board emails, next-door gossip flooding Pinterest and Reddit threads, and now the mystery SUV, things were spiraling fast. Checked my trail cams. One was missing. Another had its SD card wiped clean. That's when I knew this had gone way past neighborhood drama. Then came the anonymous letter. Slipped under my door, typed, "No signature." It read, "Asterisk, you're being watched. Don't trust anyone in that HOA." That was it. No details. Just a single cold warning. Now, I wasn't sure what worried me more, Karen's obsessive need to control the neighborhood, or whoever else had taken an interest in me, because it was clear this wasn't just about a late-night walk anymore. And the worst part, Karen still thought she was the one in charge. By the end of the week, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to snap. Karen had doubled down, calling an emergency HOA meeting to address security concerns in the neighborhood. Flyers were left on every doorstep, even stuffed into mailboxes. I wasn't named, but it was clear who she meant. The wording was, "All too familiar, asterisk, unfamiliar activity near the wooded properties. Unverified individuals. Nighttime surveillance needed." Asterisk neighbors started acting different. Some avoided eye contact. Others watched me from behind curtains when I walked my dog. Few even unfollowed me on Facebook. The rumors had taken over. Fueled by Karen's whispers, online threads, and that ridiculous 1 a.m. police call, it felt like the whole neighborhood had been sucked into her drama and I was the villain she'd built in her head. I tried to keep my distance, stay calm, gather whatever evidence I could. I checked my camera system again, replaced the ones that had been tampered with, and ran the footage back several days. That's when I saw it. 2 nights earlier, around 2:11 a.m., a figure walked up my driveway, crouched near my side window, and aimed something at the glass. They were careful, methodical, no flashlight, no sound. They stayed there for almost 4 minutes. I paused the frame. It wasn't Karen. It wasn't anyone from around here. Whoever it was wore a dark jacket and gloves, too deliberate to be random. And behind them, down the road, the same SUV waited that night. I parked a decoy vehicle at the edge of the road and sat in the dark with binoculars, watching. Sure enough, just after midnight, the SUV rolled by slow, like it was looking for something. Or someone. It didn't stop this time, just passed the cabin and disappeared into the trees. At the HOA meeting the next day, I didn't say much. I sat in the back, listening as Karen ranted about people who don't belong, showing blurry photos from her phone. She passed around a printed Reddit post titled, "Asterisk, is this guy even who he says he is?" and pointed toward me without saying my name. I stayed quiet until someone slipped into the seat beside me. A man I didn't recognize. Clean cut, no expression. He leaned close and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "You need to leave after this meeting." Quietly. No questions. "We'll contact you." That's when I realized. Karen's call didn't just cause neighborhood chaos. It had triggered something much bigger. Something I might not be able to walk away from. I didn't say a word, just nodded once, stood up, and walked out of the meeting. My heart was racing. Not from fear exactly, but from the sudden realization that this had moved far beyond Karen's gossip and HOA politics. Someone, maybe multiple people, were watching me, and now I wasn't sure if they were protecting me or hunting me. As I stepped off the porch outside the meeting hall, I noticed Karen glaring at me through the window. She didn't like being ignored, and the fact that I'd left without reacting probably made her blood boil. She thrived on drama, on getting a reaction. And now she was in deep, but she didn't even know how deep. I got in my truck and took a different route home, just in case I was being followed. But halfway through the woods, I stopped. Something didn't feel right. The trail. Camera-eyed hidden by the driveway. One I'd checked earlier that day was now dangling by its cord, ripped from the tree. Someone had found it. When I got back to the cabin, the front door was cracked open. I froze. I never leave it unlocked. I walked in slowly, every light off, hand near the small safe I kept by the bookshelf. The place looked normal at first glance, nothing broken, no signs of a struggle. But then I noticed a small red dot on the floor near my kitchen island. It wasn't blood. It was a pin from a tracking device, military grade, embedded with a chip. Someone had been inside. And they hadn't taken anything, they'd left something behind. I barely had time to process it when my burner phone buzzed, the one I kept hidden in a box under the floorboards. Only a few people even knew it existed. The message was short. Asterisk, you've been compromised. We're pulling you out. Stay offline. Asterisk, but just as I was about to leave, headlights swept across my living room window. Not the SUV this time. It was Karen's minivan. She parked right in front of my cabin, stepped out, and started taking pictures. I watched from the dark, stunned. Why was she here alone this late? Was she still playing HOA watchdog, or had she stumbled into something she shouldn't have? And then, from the corner of the woods, a second pair of headlights turned on. Karen didn't notice, but I did. And whoever it was, they weren't here for pictures. I ducked low behind the kitchen counter, heart pounding. Karen was still snapping pictures on her phone, muttering to herself as if documenting some big discovery. The second vehicle, an unmarked black truck, sat at the tree line, engine idling. The cabin lights were still off. I hadn't moved. Someone else had. The truck door opened, and two figures stepped out, both in tactical gear, not police, not local. They moved fast and quiet, staying low in the shadows. Karen didn't see them until they were almost at the edge of my porch. She turned, startled, and tried to speak, but one of the men raised a hand. Not threatening, just commanding silence, ma'am. One of them said, "This is a restricted area. You need to leave immediately." Karen blinked, confused. "Excuse me? I live here." "This man is a threat to our neighborhood. I have every right to know, ma'am," the agent said, stepping closer. "You don't. You've interfered with an ongoing federal operation. You need to return to your vehicle now." Karen opened her mouth to argue again, but something in his tone made her pause. For once, she was speechless. She looked at the second man, who had pulled out a tablet, scanning something in her direction. "We'll be in contact," he said flatly. "Go." Karen turned stiffly, got in her van, and drove off without another word. I stepped outside. Slowly, hands visible. The agents didn't flinch. One nodded, confirming who I was. "Package is secure," he said into his comms. "Subject still in place. Secondary civilian made contact. She's been removed." I stared at them. "What's going on?" The first agent walked over. "Your file was flagged." Karen's report. "Accidentally triggered a dormant watch list." "That SUV? Ours? We've been monitoring the area ever since." "The issue isn't with you, it's with your property." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the woods. "Your cabin sits on a parcel that overlaps a former underground comms relay, Cold War era. It was supposed to be decommissioned years ago, but someone's been reactivating signals from inside the grid. You weren't the source, but someone thought you were. And then came the twist." The agent held up the tracker pin I'd found earlier. "This didn't come from us," he said. Which meant someone else, someone not federal, was watching too. And they were still out there.